It has been 20 years since Shrek left his swamp and became a worldwide phenomenon. So I have Anna Swanson and Meg Shields from Film School Rejects here to help me break down the Shrek timeline. Ladies, thanks so much for joining us. So I want to start and go way back to 1994 when DreamWorks executive Jeffrey Katzenberg left Disney for DreamWorks. How did this executive drama inadvertently lead to Shrek's creation?
To make a very long and delightfully messy story very short. And I truly encourage anyone who's titillated by either corporate drama or animation history, you absolutely must read Disney War and The Men Who Would Be King. Those are essential books about this period in history and the kind of mean girl drama that happened between Disney and DreamWorks. And DreamWorks had this attitude of upstart irreverence, something to prove, not like other animation studios. And you see this kind of attitude throughout the film in terms of its irreverence, but there's also kind of these very pointed attacks at Disney that are kind of unmissable if you're familiar with the history of it. So Duloc, which is Lord Farquaad's domain, is very corporate, very sanitized, very Disneyland. And also just in terms of kind of subverting the wholesome, fantastical, fairy tale subject matter that is kind of Shrek's domain, at least in the first two films. Mm-hmm. But yeah, this kind of tongue-in-cheek, grotesque body reading of fantasy films felt like a pretty big middle finger to the kind of wholesome Disney brand, as well as this kind of interpersonal feud between Eisner and Katzenberg.
So then let's fast forward to May of 2001 when Shrek premieres at the Cannes Film Festival to a literal standing ovation. How does that happen?
In general, Cannes is a strange place. Very odd movies will get 20-minute standing ovations. And, it's kind of I think at a Cannes premiere, half the people are going to walk out, half the people are going to applaud it for 15 minutes. And so I think kind of the combination of the atmosphere at the festival and the film itself kind of contributed to this, raucous reception, shall we call it.
So then after Cannes, the film comes out May 18th, 2001. What would you say made it such a big hit?
In the early 2000s, there was such a kind of cynical, upstart, irreverent kind of attitude in a lot of media. This kind of anything kind of capital E edgy was a huge hit at the time. I think that for anyone who would have been, at the right age in 2001, those first 8 minutes of Shrek with Smash Mouth playing are just seared into our brains. It just got the spirit of the time in such a strong way that it couldn't help but be a hit.
There is absolutely value there in even just understanding what this film means historically for film, for animation. And I think that you might hate it, but you can't dispute that it's important in some way.
Shrek became, in May of 2002, the first winner for Best Animated Feature. It won an Oscar. How do you feel that changed computer animation after that?
It did up the game considerably in terms of photorealistic human CGI. It's kind of hard to overestimate how lasting of an effect Shrek had on animation. In the late 90s and early 2000s, anyone who did anything with CGI animation, fully CGI animation, we're basically inventing fully CGI animation. And we kind of forget about that just because it's so prevalent these days. What Shrek did that was kind of revolutionary is animate a pretty human looking character. Apart from being green and having weird ears, he's a pretty human looking character. And it did so pretty convincingly. And what the animators did to pull that off was effectively build these 3D puppets that had digital muscles and digital pores, so that as they were being puppeteered digitally, they would get wrinkles and creases in their faces, their pores would stretch, which at the time was bonkers. That was totally new territory. There's a whole bunch of fully CGI animation from Illumination and all these kind of new studios that have propagated since DreamWorks that have this kind of eyebrow cocked to them with musical sequences. All of that goes back to Shrek.
Around that same time, Shrek 2 came out in 2004. How did they handle the transition into a franchise?
I know a lot of people, myself included, kind of consider the second one to be the best. And I think it kind of hits that point where, the people who loved Shrek, the kids who loved it, haven't sort of aged out of it, we can still sort of appreciate Shrek 2, but it also has the technological advantages that have come with a few extra years. So it even looks a little bit better.
Do you think that the Shrek trend will last, or is this destined to like peak with millennial nostalgia?
We watched all 4 current theatrical Shrek releases in one day. And
oh, wow. That's a lot of Shrek.
Yeah. Also the 4th one, good movie. But this question of like, who is Shrek for at all? And then who will Shrek be for? Will kids be watching it in another 20 years? Is kind of, it continues to evade us, because at least for the first 3 Shreks, which kind of rely on this very temporally specific, attitude and pop culture references, it's hard to imagine kids getting the same kind of cultural currency out of that we did. But at the same time, I think kids are going to still love farts and like all the taboo stuff in 20 years.
Animation it sort of ebbs and flows, where, I look at, things that I find interesting and nice in animation. And a lot of the animation that I like the most is older stuff. I prefer the look of earlier Disney films. Like my favorite in terms of animation is Sleeping Beauty. I'm also sure it won't hurt that, all of the millennials becoming parents are going to want to show their kids what their favorite movie was. And for a lot of people, that's Shrek.
This has become such a large part of online culture. And I would love to know from the two of you, do either of you have like a favorite Shrek related trend or meme?
The most impressive piece of kind of fan generated content about Shrek for me will always be Shrek Retold. 200 different collaborators made a shot for shot remake of Shrek, like live action, animated, you name it. And it's just like such an artifact of being there for Shrek in the early 2000s, and how we all kind of just know the exact rhythms and beats, and this kind of like, even in, the early days of YouTube, people reenacting movie scenes and like playing with the cadences of line deliveries was a really big thing. You don't see that as much anymore. And so I don't know, Shrek Retold just feels like definite, like I don't think we'll have another Shrek Retold in 20 years. So it's just like a very fun coda to the kind of Shrek madness that exists online.
As much as it's kind of, semi a joke, I think it also comes from a place of love, where people do have a fondness for this and they want to, engage with it on that level.
Anna and Meg, thank you so much for joining me. Check out their Double Take column on Film School Rejects for more great film related discussions. Ladies, thanks so much.
Thanks for having us so much.